The banned supertrain still hidden in a warehouse. This is the forbidden history of the machine that was too fast for the government to allow. In 1974, while the rest of the world was stuck at 80 miles per hour, France built a rocket on a rail. It did not have wheels. It floated on a cushion of air, and it was powered by a massive jet engine. It hit 267 miles per hour, a record that should have made it the future of the world. But instead of building it, the government ordered its destruction. They defunded the project. They abandoned the tracks. Then the last surviving prototype was hidden away in a secret hangar, only to be destroyed by a mysterious fire that many believe was no accident. Why would the state murder the most advanced train ever built? What really happened inside that warehouse in the middle of the night? A concrete spine cuts through the empty fields outside Saran. It rises 5 meters above the wheat, stretching for 18 kilometers with no destination. The locals call it the hovering ghost. No trains run here. The viaduct stands silent, a monument to a future that never arrived. Moss creeps along the inverted T cross-section. Steel brackets rust in the open air. At dawn, mist clings to the guideway's edges, making the structure seem to float above the earth. There are no signs, no fences, no explanations, only the echo of what once was. This is not a ruin from the distant past. The concrete is too clean, the lines too sharp. Every angle is precise. The guideway's tolerances were set to within 5 millimeters. It was built for speed beyond anything seen on rails. But now, it's abandoned. A relic left to weather and rot. The countryside has started to reclaim it, but the skeleton remains unmistakable, defiant, out of place. Children ride their bikes beneath the pillars. Farmers shake their heads and call it a folly, but the stories linger. People whisper about secret tests, about a machine that floated on air and left nothing but a ghost behind. The viaduct waits, silent and unmarked. A forbidden monument, an abandoned relic. The first and last trace of a technology the government tried to erase. Jean Bertin stood apart, not just another engineer chasing a government contract. In 1955, he left the comfort of France's state jet engine program and started a company with his own name on the door. Bertin & Cie was small, almost invisible to the giants of industry. But Bertin moved with a different map, a future where trains floated, friction vanished, and speed had no ceiling. He was restless, obsessed with air, lift, and the secrets of control. By the early 1960s, his notebooks filled with sketches of machines that rode on cushions of compressed air. He filed patents for air cushion vehicles and linear motors, ideas that seemed more science fiction than transport policy. The state took notice, so did private backers. Money trickled in, enough to build something real. In 1966, Bertin's team rolled out a half-scale prototype on a lonely stretch near Gometz-le-Châtel. The model was crude, a metal pod with an aircraft engine strapped to its back. But when the compressors fired, the machine lifted free of the track. It hovered. It moved. The demonstration was short, noisy, and spectacular. Witnesses described a sound like a jet at takeoff, but the vehicle barely touched the guideway. The press called Bertin a dreamer. He did not care. He knew what he had seen. Bertin's drive was relentless. He wrote to ministers, lobbied for land, and made promises no one else would dare. His vision was simple: erase the wheel, float on air, outpace every rival. The aerotrain was no accident. It was the product of one man's refusal to accept the limits the world had set. Inside the aerotrain, the rules of motion were rewritten. This was not a train. It was a machine that hovered, lifted clear of the earth by nothing but pressure and calculation. 4 centrifugal compressors forced air into a sealed skirt, building a cushion at 0.8 megapascals. Enough to float a 50-ton vessel with the weight of 80 passengers, their luggage, and the steel bones of the hull. The air cushion was thin, 5 millimeters. That was the tolerance. The concrete guideway had to be perfect, poured and ground until its surface deviated no more than the width of a pencil line. Any more, and the aerotrain would scrape, stall, or worse. The hull wrapped around the cushion like a shell. Flexible ribs along the skirt sealed the chamber, trapping the pressure, fighting every leak. Engineers spent months refining the angle of the skirt, 24 degrees, not a fraction more, so turbulence would not bleed away the lift. A leak was not just a nuisance, it was a threat. Lose pressure, and the machine dropped hard onto unforgiving concrete. There were no second chances at 250 miles per hour. Stability came from guidance wheels pressed against the vertical walls of the T-shaped track. These were not train wheels, they were stabilizers, pushed out by hydraulic arms, measuring every movement, correcting drift within a margin of 5 millimeters. Sensors tracked the hull's position, feeding data to the control system, always hunting for the edge of disaster. The entire craft was a balancing act, air, steel, and speed locked in a tense truce. Propulsion was violence. A jet engine, the same model used on commercial airliners, thundered at the rear. Its exhaust fed the compressors, its thrust hurled the aerotrain forward. But the real power was in the absence of friction. No wheels, no rails, just a thin film of air and the relentless push of physics. Every component, every tolerance, every reading from the pressure gauges mattered. The machine was a dare, a challenge to the old order. Proof that technological superiority could be engineered, measured, and made real, if only the world would let it run. On March 5, 1974, the aerotrain I-80HV lined up on the Saran guideway. The air was sharp. Engineers checked the compressors, the jet engine, the pressure seals. Every reading mattered. At 9:17, the telemetry was set. A laser Doppler velocimeter, model LD-V100, aimed down the concrete spine. Two radar guns, one from the Ministry of Equipment and another from the Centre d'études aérospatiales, stood guard at the 5 and 13 kilometer marks. Nothing left to chance, not today. The I-80's hull vibrated as the Pratt & Whitney JT-D7 engine spooled up, 6.8 tons of thrust. The vehicle lifted, hovered, and then released. The jet's scream swallowed the fields. The train shot forward, skimming 5 millimeters above the guideway, carrying a full mock passenger load. Dummy seats, ballast, 7 tons, just like a real run. Past the 9-kilometer midpoint, the laser caught it, 430.3 kilometers per hour. That is 267 miles per hour. The highest speed ever recorded by a ground vehicle on an air cushion. The figure was not rumor. It was not a publicity stunt. The Magtech magnetic recorder logged every data point. The radar teams confirmed the reading within 0.2%. Official observers watched as the I-80 braked, hydraulic discs biting, reverse thrust roaring, coming to a stop after 2,150 meters. No errors, no ambiguity. The numbers matched. Chief Engineer Claude Leger signed the test log. His signature, inked on Ministry of Transport letterhead, entered the state archives. The record was certified, stamped, and published in the Bulletin Officiel du Gouvernement on March 7, 1974. No redacted records, no missing tapes. For a moment, the proof was undeniable. But records have a way of vanishing. The aerotrain's world record was a direct threat to the TGV program. The evidence of technological superiority, telemetry, signed logs, independent verification became ammunition in a rivalry that would soon turn political. The moment the aerotrain proved itself, the countdown to its erasure began. May 1974. The election swept through France like a cold front. Ballots stacked up in town halls. Cabinet doors slammed shut. The old guard was out. The new regime arrived with briefcases and a mandate to review every project that threatened the status quo. Overnight, the aerotrain was no longer the state's darling. It was a liability, a problem to be solved. In the corridors of power, files changed hands. The Ministry of Transport summoned technical dossiers. The Saran test log, still warm from the March record run, landed on a policy desk under fluorescent lights. Men in gray suits scanned signatures. They saw numbers that made the TGV look slow. They saw arrival with proof stamped in ink and certified by radar. That kind of evidence doesn't disappear quietly. The cabinet's first question was simple. Who authorized this? Who signed off on a machine that could outpace, out-accelerate, and outshine the National Rail Plan? Names circulated: engineers, ministers, regional officials who had once posed for photographs beside the hovering train. Now those names were liabilities. The political wind had shifted. The Aerotrain's world record was no longer a badge of honor. It was a threat, a challenge to the government's vision for France's future. Within weeks, the cabinet called for a formal review. Meetings dragged into the night. Reports were demanded: cost projections, energy consumption, environmental impact. But the real question hung in the air. What happens if the public demands the faster train? What happens if the TGV loses its grip on the national budget? The Aerotrain's technological superiority was now a weakness. Every page of the dossier was a reminder that the old rules didn't apply. Not anymore. On June 22, 1974, the cabinet met behind closed doors. The decision would not be made on technical merit. It would be made at the intersection of politics and fear. The sense of vulnerability was sudden, sharp, and absolute. The Aerotrain had shown what was possible. The government was about to show what was permissible. The numbers were never neutral. SNCF, France's national rail operator, produced a memo in the spring of 1974 that would tip the scales for good. The document landed on the desk of Georges Berard, SNCF's chief of research, a man who understood that budgets could kill as surely as bullets. The memo spelled out a simple equation. TGV could be built for 6 billion francs. The Aerotrain, they claimed, would cost 12 billion francs. Double the price for a machine that hovered, a machine that proved the old order was obsolete. But the math was cooked. SNCF's figures lumped in every possible expense: experimental lines, prototype failures, inflated maintenance projections. The TGV's own overruns and hidden subsidies were quietly ignored. The cost of tearing up countryside for new tracks, the price of electrifying hundreds of kilometers, all disappeared into the fine print. What remained was a weapon, a budget line that could be wielded in a smoky committee room. Georges Berard presented these numbers to Parliament. He stood before the Commission des Transports and declared that the TGV offered lower operating costs, less risk, and a future that fit the government's vision. The debate was short. The outcome was never in doubt. On March 28, 1974, the Assembly voted 285 to 57 to reallocate funds. The Aerotrain's line item vanished from the budget. The ink was barely dry before the executive decree arrived. The contract was summarily annulled, no appeal, no review, just a redacted record in the archives and a line of text in the Journal Officiel. Winners and losers were clear. SNCF consolidated its grip. The TGV would become the state's flagship, a symbol of French progress built on the bones of its rival. The Aerotrain was erased not by failure, but by a political sabotage disguised as fiscal prudence. The beneficiaries were not the public, but the entrenched interests who controlled the purse strings and the narrative. The real cost was paid in vanished evidence, abandoned relics, and the memory of a technology that had been too superior to survive. The last Aerotrain prototype waited in silence at the Saran depot. For nearly 2 decades, it sat behind locked gates. A shell of pressed fiberglass, jet engine mounts stripped, windows clouded with dust. The guideway outside was overgrown, but inside the hangar, the machine remained intact, the final witness. The only surviving proof of technological superiority, a relic that could still challenge the official narrative if anyone looked too closely. On the night of June 12, 1992, that proof vanished. A fire broke out just after midnight. Flames tore through the control room and storage vault. The blaze burned for hours, unchecked. Local firefighters struggled to reach the site. The elevated concrete track blocked their trucks. By the time the first hoses hit the smoldering wreckage, the damage was total. Nothing left but twisted metal, scorched blueprints, and the blackened hull of the I-80. The official SPTS report cited an electrical fault in the abandoned control panel, but the timing was too perfect. The last archive of original engineering drawings, test run logs, and material samples gone in a single night. 27 files, magnetic tapes, and every trace of the record-breaking run erased. Insurance paid out 2.3 million francs for public heritage documents. No copies survived. The archive gap was permanent. The last physical evidence of a forbidden technology lost to a suspicious fire. The aerotrain was reduced to ashes, and with it, the final challenge to the government's redacted records and the official story of the TGV's uncontested rise. Insurance adjusters arrived at Saran with clipboards and calculators. They walked the blackened ruins, counting what could never be replaced. The payout was 2.3 million francs, not for a lost machine, for public heritage documents. The files were gone. The records, the blueprints, the test logs all vanished in the smoke. The official inventory from 1995 lists 27 missing dossiers. Each file had a number. Each number was a gap. The archivist in Loiret wrote a single line. Missing after 1992 fire. Original plates and magnetic tapes presumed destroyed. No copies surfaced, no backups. The last magnetic tape from the 1974 record run was gone. The insurance settlement closed the case, but the erasure was permanent. The Saran viaduct still stands, a strip of concrete with no destination. The rest is a shadow. A technological superiority wiped clean. Redacted records, suspicious fire, political sabotage. These are not conspiracy theories, they are the only facts left. Somewhere in the archives, a note remains. An archivist's question written in the margin. Why were there no duplicates? No answer, only silence. The abandoned relic waits in the fields. The government annulment is final. But the missing files haunt the official story, daring anyone to look for what was lost. If answers exist, they are hidden in the gaps. The public is left with a call: demand the truth, demand the files, refuse to let the record stay redacted. Today, the aerotrain's abandoned relic sits in the weeds. The last prototype was erased by a suspicious fire. Political sabotage wrapped in redacted records. Government annulment paved the way for TG5, but it buried technological superiority. As officials still refuse to open the archives, the real casualty is public trust. Some futures are stolen in silence. What else is locked behind closed doors? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.